This one's a little bit more speculative. I actually wanted to talk a little bit about Biden and how cooked he is and how cooked we all are. You know, uh, especially with regards to the Middle East. The Middle East, you've heard of it, right? You've heard of it. Wacky place full of wacky people. Some of them wear hats. Some of them don't. I hear they worship a god. Who is that god? No one knows. But we've been having issues there for a while. I don't really want to do the whole John Madden red line sitmap on the whole situation, what's going on over here, but we're all familiar with the broad points right now. Western intervention in the Middle East has largely been a failed project, and this is for a variety of reasons. First of all, there's only one real way to meaningfully pacify an opposing population, okay? Well, there's two. One of them is you make them like you. We didn't do that. The other one is you are an actual empire doing long-term occupation and conquest. If you're doing some proper Persian Ottoman Empire shit where you simply absorb a territory, conquer it, take your grain and your gold and taxes, and then wait 500 years for all the ethnic groups to be blended to a point of near incomprehensible semi-unity, that might work. We didn't do that one either. Our project of intervention has largely been one of, the British went down there and we engaged in what Marxists would call primitive accumulation or wealth extraction of the less fancy variety, or we killed a bunch of people and took stuff. And we drew very wacky lines in the sand, I'm sure this 400-mile long, perfectly vertical line perfectly represents the ethnic, religious, and cultural boundaries of peoples that have... Actually, this might not be a good place to make this argument because there probably aren't very many people there. That's a desert. Okay, this place too, all right? Yeah, all around the place you see stuff like this, okay? We know what the British did for the lines there, okay? Don't make fun of me. It's my birthday. I'm a birthday boy, okay? Come on. You can tell pretty clearly the difference in areas where borders are drawn out a little more naturally and areas where borders were drawn out slightly less naturally. One of the big issues we're having right now is that Iran exists. Iran has, damn it, use satellite map. Oh yeah, we should. Click. Neat. So Iran has, as I understand it, 500 billion people living in it. The entire nation is a natural fortress. It's impenetrable. It can't be defeated, all right? Their pagan god gives them enormous strength. What do we do about this? Well, for a while, we had the Shah, and then that didn't work out. And a united coalition of different anti-Shah militia groups within Iran fought against him, and after all the dust settled, the group that won out was the radical Islamists, which wasn't great for us. Now they hate America. Actually, everyone does here, basically, except for Pakistan. They're a military dictatorship, and they're allies with us. Afghanistan's controlled by the Taliban. They hate America. Iran, they hate America. When I say they, by the way, I mean the Ayatollah. The population of Iran is surprisingly varied in their political opinions. Keep in mind, the Iranian Revolution didn't happen that long ago, right? A lot of people in Iran remember personally the brief hope they had of living in a democracy. A lot of them did. Millions of Iranians, for a brief while after the fall of the Shah during the Iranian Revolution, thought, wow, we've done away with this Western puppet, with this oligarch, or not this oligarch, sorry, this autocrat. We might be able to replace him with something real. And then the Ayatollah came about. So they're still wrestling with those feelings. The population of Iraq, whether or not they like us a lot or a little, we didn't do a great job of ingratiating ourselves to the fine people of Iraq. Blah, 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 blah. Saudi Arabia. Hey, these guys hated by everyone. You know why everyone hates Saudi Arabia? You should see what they did to Mecca, okay? So-called centerpiece of Islam, the big Minecraft cube. What did they do? They built like a Dubai on top of it. Incredibly tacky. Very, very, very Islamophobic. The House of Saud. Not great. To be fair, the Shah was more complicated than a Western puppet. He was a complicated puppet, okay, of the West. Complicatedly. They also built Big Ben. They built more than Big Ben. You see that? Hold on. This size comparison actually like me up. It's actually insane how large. Here we go. This is the Makkah Royal Clock Tower next to the House of Parliament and Big Ben next to it. There's the difference. Insane. This cost $1 trillion in petrodollars, you know? 1 trillion petrodollars. Incomprehensibly large. Anyway, it's considered quite gaudy, if you can believe it. People, look at this. God, I can't, like, it's desecration of a holy site, you know? Like, what if we did, like, religion, but also made it Las Vegas? Like, in other places, these buildings would be cool. It's just like they're doing this as a tourist bit. Like, these are all apartments. They're not apartments. These are hotels for the goddamn... Okay, anyway. It's a mall. They've got a Five Guys there. They have a halal Five Guys. And Saudi Arabia exists. The point that I'm gesturing at here is that it's complicated and nobody's a full expert on the Middle East. There's too much going on. Very wacky place. Very, very wacky. The point of getting across that it's wacky. So what do we do here, right? The reason I'm talking about this is because of these news articles that I looked at recently and had thoughts on. I touched on them a little bit. So largely in response for U.S. presence in the region, and also because people are real rustled after Israel did that whole genociding Palestinians thing, which they're continuing to do with our support. Attacks in Jordan killed 3 U.S. service members. I think they were like contractors too. I think they were reservists, like engineers. Sorry, they weren't contractors. I think they were reservist engineers. I don't even think they were like regular combat troops too, which is a shame. They could have gone back home pretty soon after. Yeah, imagine they finally get 3 kills on U.S. soldiers, and they're all reservists, and they were all black. So Iranian-backed militias are racist, is the thing that I'm getting at. All the militias in this region, or at least not all of them, but enough of them, are Iranian-backed. So naturally, the pressure is on Biden right now to signal that he, in a very sane and logical manner, wants to end the world by engaging in reprisal against Iran. Now, for reasons that I've discussed at length in the past, Iran is not a country that you can invade unless you're really willing to commit to the bit. I would argue it's not even a country you can meaningfully threaten. Iran's regime builds its power and legitimacy off of the perceived and real threat of American intervention. Again, please keep in mind there are people in Iran who remember in their own lifetimes living under the Shah, the Western-backed king, basically. So the memory of American oppression is not exactly a distant and far gone one. It's something that still very much influences their political rhetoric to this day. It's like a significant portion of it, even. So if we struck Iran, do you think that would reduce the amount of money going to the militias they're using to harass us across the Middle East? Probably not. I think that cultural hegemony, that is like having the power to exert influence in the regions around you, that's something that mostly, at least here, I feel, goes to Iran, right? Saudi Arabia has clout with the OPEC countries, any of these disgusting slave states that build their, like Dubai or whatever, they make it all off petrodollars. Those countries run in their own circle. But in terms of like this area, and I mean, obviously the Houthis in Yemen, Iran has exerted a significant amount of control. I mean, look at it. Look at how big Iran is. Please remember, all of Iran is a country. 90% of Saudi Arabia is dog shit. Iran is a real country, and it's huge. It's bigger than Ukraine. It's, it's a big. It's big. I mean, look at it. You can kind of tell whether or not it can be occupied just based on the terrain here. Look at how mountainous Iran is. and compare it to the massive desert that is Saudi Arabia, not even good sand in Saudi Arabia. Did you know that? A lot of the sand they have can't be used for construction, for cement. It's not the right composition or grain type. You know, it's bad sand, useless sand, worthless land, some of the most worthless land in the world. Bad sand. Can you imagine failing at being sand? Ridiculous. Anyway, Iran is not a desert. It's just a big mountain range. It's huge. So, okay. If I keep looking at the map, I'm going to want to keep pointing at it because I really like maps. You know, it's an autism thing. The pressure is on, as it has been for a long time, to engage in military aggression against Iran because there are really only two things that we can do with Iran, okay? Either we stay in the Middle East, as we are right now with our military bases and our occupation and our regime change efforts and what have you, with Iran continuing to pester us with their backed militias and missiles and blah-de-blah, or we leave the region and allow a significant amount of territory that we fought over to effectively just become, you know, not Iranian, but at the very least, they're not going to be pro-America. And that's obviously something that a lot of people in the Middle East don't want. A lot of this also ties into our relationship with Saudi Arabia, who are, by the way, bastards and want the world to end. There have been pushes in Saudi Arabia to, like, politically meddle in the affairs of developing African and Southeast Asian countries to get them hooked on oil and road infrastructure. Because in a world that is increasingly understanding how bad dependence on fossil fuels is, they want to make sure that everyone keeps buying their product. They've literally got PowerPoint discussions on, like, yeah, so what if we made sure the right people get elected in these countries, you know? Like, it's truly evil, despicable stuff. Don't like these guys. I think that for the most part, the Iranian-backed militias are kind of in the right when it comes to pushing us out. Again, this is something where, like, we would be on the opposite side of the aisle perspective-wise if it was happening to us. Like, if there was another gigantic foreign empire that was consistently occupying and developing military facilities in the regions near us, threatening us, like, we would obviously be a lot more jingoistic about, you know, funding militias to push us out. At the very least, you're correct, Philomath. It is a Satan versus Satan issue. At the very least, we're not the good guys. So my hope has always been, I guess, that in the absence of American intervention in the Middle East, like, if we weren't really, really present there, I've always felt like Iran would be more likely to develop into something approximating a democracy. You know what I mean? Like, I think that it would be more likely that good things would happen there. The two main countries that need to shift are Saudi Arabia and Iran. Now, Saudi Arabia is evil, and that is largely our fault. Saudi Aramco, you go Wikipedia the history of that company if you want. Saudi Arabia is essentially just the apparatus of statehood constructed around an oil company. Like, this is so on us. By the way, our fault, the fault of the Brits. Yeah. By the way, we were going to coup Saudi Arabia when they nationalized their oil, Saudi Aramco. We didn't, in large part because they just bought us off. Like, literally, the deal was because, you know, it was an oil company that was getting nationalized. And normally when that happens, we go in with our guns. But they were like, no. We, Saudi Arabia, we will compensate you heavily. We will give you lots of money in oil. Don't coup us. And we didn't. And now we are where we are. I'm not saying cooing would have been the right answer. I'm just saying, like, we are deeply involved in the history of Saudi Arabia and everything that makes them evil today. So, yeah. With that being said, like, the Saudi Arabia business, we aid and abet them all the time. We barely speak ill of Saudi Arabia, you know? We do not... If we have a moral objection to their behavior, we don't really do much to show it. And with regards to Iran, I really do think our absence could, I don't know, lend more to do there, you know? Like, I feel like our presence there is exacerbating things in a very negative way, which is why I'm concerned with the direction that we're going right now concerning Iran. They don't call us the Great Satan for nothing. I can feel it in my bones. Can you feel it? Can you feel that emotional energy? It's the energy of waffling, almost like I don't know what point I want to make. The point that I want to make is that long-term policy in the Middle East has to confront the fact this is like a Democrat or Republican thing. I'm just talking pure real politic here, okay? The resources that would be required to pacify the region are now beyond us, you know? I don't think occupation of Iran is viable without widespread nuclear weapon use. I don't think we could, purely because of the terrain. Do you have any idea how difficult it would be to invade Iran just because of the mountains? Like, ridiculous. Difficult to even conceive. And with regards to Saudi Arabia, any disruption to their oil production would make you an enemy of the world if you did anything invasion-wise. So both politically and logistically, that's off the table. In terms of diplomacy, it seems like this is kind of a non-starter. Non-involvement in the Middle East might be the only way for things in that area to stabilize. This is why I was in favor of Biden pulling out of Afghanistan, a morally correct but politically disastrous decision from which his approval ratings have never recovered. Everyone says they want us to end the American wars, end the empire, withdraw from the conflict, and then he does it, and his approval rating goes down because, what, a dozen U.S. servicemen died? With respect. Quickly exiting a country, a dozen, it could be far worse. Like, yeah, sure, there's a perfect iteration of that pullout, but my God, you know, compared to the number of people who have died throughout the entirety of our occupation there, end the war, right? How long would we have needed to stay there for us to, like, find a way to do this with a perfect, whatever. It was on Trump's timeline too. Yeah, that's correct. And now the Taliban, who are evil, control Afghanistan. But I don't think there was any other way. I think our continued presence in Afghanistan wasn't doing anything good. This is something that Afghanistan has to get over on its own. Not on its own necessarily, but just having a bunch of soldiers there doesn't fix problems like these. You know, you can't just build democracy abroad. It doesn't work. It doesn't work like that. That's not how it works. It's complicated, you idiots. You can't just do that. But the main destabilizing force in the region, and the one we're most responsible for, is, of course, Israel. We are supporting them wholeheartedly. Even though Israel is like as bad for the Middle East as you can imagine anything being, we don't want to pull out of the Middle East, and we don't want to pull out from Israel, in large part because we want them as a wedge against Iran. We're afraid Iran might develop nuclear weapons, which they will. They're close to it. They will. So it just seems like a political non-starter. Remember, everything we've done, quote unquote, for Israel is purely because we're using them as a proxy against Iran. That's it. It is true that lately Israel has been acting more and more like a rogue state. They have been acting less and less in United States interests. And I do think that there should be severe consequences to the officials that have made those decisions. Their brutal treatment of the Palestinians is, to quote someone else that I'm now forgetting, not just morally wrong, but also a mistake. Right? We've seen a tiny bit of pushback. The United States has placed sanctions on Israeli settlers over the increasing violence in the West Bank. You know, this has been a violation of international law for decades. There's no secret to it. So this effort now to sanction comes across to me as a pathetic and limp-wristed effort to point at something, you know, anything, to try to get people to not, like, you know, disapprove of Biden as hard as they are, right? Like all the young voters, all the people who care about the Palestinians. Hey, look, we sanctioned Israeli settlers. I mean, they've been doing this for decades, and we know they've been doing it for decades, and like we didn't really do anything before. Look, hey, we did something. I mean, the main genocide's happening in Gaza, but you know, hey. Of course, what's going on in the West Bank has also accelerated massively, since the full push is just to exterminate or remove the Palestinian people. But I think that's why this is happening here. I don't think this is some, like, immediate, you know, sincere moral opposition to what they're doing. I think it's just an attempt to recover some perceived legitimacy in the face of everything that's been going on. I don't know what the future here is, you know? A big part of this is also the fact that Israel's official on-the-books policy is basically, if you invade us and we seem like we're losing, we are going to nuke the entire Middle East. The Samson doctrine. Which means that we can't really leave Israel to itself, because if Israel does not have... if Israel doesn't have the money or the weapons to defend itself, and other nations nearby decide, you know, hey, maybe this is our shot, and they invade, or even if they feel threatened enough, they could just begin World War III on their own, which is great, you know? A more unstable rogue nuclear state than North Korea by far. The Samson option is Israel's deterrent strategy of massive retaliation with nuclear weapons as a last resort against a country whose military has invaded and or destroyed much of Israel. Nice! Thank you, Israel. Those sanctions affect just 4 settlers. And I'm sure those 4 settlers are very upset. At least North Korea has an enemy with nukes. Also, Israel has far, 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 far more nukes than North Korea does. How do we let Israel get nukes? I mean, because we've been using them as a proxy. We put nukes in Turkey, for fuck's sake, right? Not like they're super stable. Certainly not now. Sorry, I am waffling. The reason I wanted to say all of this is because I don't really know what the strategy moving forward is, and I don't know what's even politically viable, right? Like, the problem is, I fully believe the United States should stop what's happening in Gaza, and we could if we wanted to. But there's no way to do that without doing regime change shit against Netanyahu. It seems like anything that we did to intervene in a way that would stop Israel would require us to put our hand on the brakes hard enough that it would effectively just involve, media goes dark for 24 hours. The next day, Israelis wake up and see on the television a new guy speaking and talking about like the mistakes of the previous regime. Netanyahu took a fall down the stairs, that kind of thing. Now, will America actually do that? No, because we only do regime change to countries that are doing something good. Okay, not to something bad. And when a country is doing something bad, we throw our hands up in the air. You know, we're powerless. Any version of Israel being present here, even in a kind of like 2-state solution deal, would be an antagonizing force in the region. There's no getting around that. I guess past a point, it really just feels like any involvement of ours makes things worse. Lawmakers press Biden to get Congress approval for Middle East airstrikes. This is for the Houthis, for what's going on in Yemen. Remember, the system that Biden is using to legitimize the strikes that he's doing in Yemen, it only gives him permission for a short time. He's not going to have much longer. Past a point, this is going to have to go through Congress. He can't extend it indefinitely. Past that point, it would either be illegal, or he would need to get both sides, or enough of them at least, to agree to it. The ineffective strikes, we should note. I don't know whether or not they've been effective. Has there been any reduction in the attacks on civilian vessels? And even that could be like more because we have ships in the region than anything else. Could he wait until the Houthis attack us again? I don't know if you can keep re-upping this based on like a new perceived threat. Like every time the Houthis send a drone over, it's like, oh, 90 more days. Here's the threat. You know, I don't know how that works exactly. Obviously, past a point, you have to go through Congress. I say have to as though presidents don't break laws or bend rules. You know, it would be nice to go through Congress. I think it would be cool to go through Congress. In retaliation for the 3 U.S. reservists who were killed in Jordan just the other day, the U.S. has approved plans for multi-day strikes in Iraq and Syria against multiple targets, including Iranian personnel and facilities. So, Iranian personnel and facilities and like militias they back or fund or give weapons to or whatever. Whether or not this is going to be largely performative, or whether this is going to be performative, or whether this is going to be like substantial, I don't really know. U.S. officials have weighed how to punish Iran-backed militias without triggering a wider war. At what point do you just leave? We have 12 bases in Iraq, according to this quick Google search that I just did. You know, at what point do you just leave Iraq? Do you have any speculation on what the U.S. might do? I'm not sure. Right now, the American people don't have much of an appetite for war or anything that feels like it. I mean, look, even right now, it's getting politically unpopular to support giving more weapons to Ukraine, even though that's not even us being in a war. It's just, there are a bunch of articles like this, by the way. Look at this. Biden faces pressure to strike Iran after U.S. troops killed. Not facilities outside of Iran in Syria or Iraq, but Iran itself. Republicans accuse Biden of letting American forces become sitting ducks, waiting for the day when a drone or missile would evade base defenses. They say the day came on Sunday when a single one-way attack drone... Tom Cotton, hey, remember that guy? That's the China guy. We just saw... Hey, remember him? He left our troops as sitting ducks, said U.S. Senator Tom Cotton. The only answer to these attacks must be devastating military retaliation against the Forbidden Palace and the so-called immortal emperor that dwells within. His terracotta legions will be no match against our... Right. Against Iran's terrorist forces, both and in Iran and across the Middle East. Mike Rogers, it's long past time for President Biden to finally hold the terrorist Iranian regime and their extremist proxies accountable for the attacks they've carried out. Donald Trump, who might win this upcoming election, portrayed the attack as a consequence of Joe Biden's weakness and surrender. Guys, I really can't overstate how much I don't want us to attack Iran. You know, I really don't want Holden Blood Feast shit to happen. If for no other reason than because this, like leaving aside the fact that legitimately, I really genuinely feel like with the right international pressure, Iran could end up being an ally of the United States. I mean that. I really think, based on what I understand of their population, they're having huge progressive protests right now against the hijab and the government. Like, the population of Iran could potentially, like, move the country in a great direction. And what do you think is going to happen to that population if we start missile striking them and hundreds of civilians in Iran die? Do you think they're all going to, like, suddenly become better advocates for freedom and democracy and allyship with the United States? No. They would suddenly, more of them would look at what the Ayatollah has said, America, great Satan, and they would become more reactionary against us. The government of Iran would love it if we attack them. They love it that we attack their proxies. It would be worse than the Iraq War. Okay, leaving aside, like, the fact that boots on the ground are basically incredibly unlikely, even under Trump if he won, if we did a boots on the ground invasion of Iran, it would be worse than Vietnam and Afghanistan and Iraq put together. It would be like our version of the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. It would be an incomprehensibly, unimaginably disastrous endeavor, the likes of which has no parallel in American history. It would be ridiculous, you know. The only thing you can really do by missile striking Iran is ensure their population is pushed further and further towards, you know, reactionary, purely anti-American interests. I mean, wasn't our version already like the Soviet invasion? No, not really. The invasion of Afghanistan broke the Soviet Union. The invasion of Afghanistan from the United States did what? What did it do to us? I mean, don't get me wrong, it was a quagmire, but America is not a empire. We're the empire. With our wealth and power, you know, the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan destroyed them. For us, it just, oh, our national debt went up? Whatever. It wouldn't be like that if we invaded Iran. Put us out several trillion bucks, I think. Yeah, several trillion, whatever. Yeah, money's not real. Money's not real. Get out of town. But the pressure is building. And guys, you know, I hope it doesn't happen, but if Trump wins, I mean, think about it. Trump is the architect of our current bad relationship with Iran by pulling us out of the nuclear accords, you know? He was pretty, like, he struck Ayatollah, sorry, not Ayatollah, Soleimani. Just murked him. I think there's a very real possibility that if Trump won, real military engagement with Iran would be his masterpiece. I'm saying masterpiece sarcastically here. It would be like, that would be the foreign enemy. Because I don't think he can really do it with China, you know? Because for one, China and America are completely economically intertwined, you know, completely dependent on each other. I don't think realistically Republican voters are interested in a war with Mexico. I think maybe, who knows? Who can predict anything these days? But I don't think that's very likely. We can't invade China for a variety of reasons. Besides, Trump likes China, you know? I think it would be Iran. And if that happens, I don't know. What do you think? She doesn't know she's a dumb baby. I try to remind her when I can.